Welcome to York Story Slam's 5th annual Grand Slam. My name is JJ Sheffer. I'm the event producer for York Story Slam. What a year. Together, despite everything that's going on in the world, we have made it to the end of another season of York Story Slam. Tonight, you're going to hear from all the winners from this year's monthly open mic storytelling events as they compete for the title of Best Storyteller in York, this obnoxious trophy, and bragging rights for an entire year. I'd like to say a few thank yous before we begin. First, to the Appel Center for Performing Arts. They've hosted all 5 of our Grand Slams, and we really appreciate being able to work with them in this beautiful space. Next, we'd like to thank Story Supply Company. They provide the coveted journals that our monthly winners take home. The only way to get one of these is to win one of our slams. I don't even have one of these. We do have a monthly podcast featuring a selection of stories every month. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That's produced with some help on the script from Sarah Chain and produced by Carla Wilson at Wilson Media Services. Carla is the event producer for Lancaster Story Slam. She's been a wonderful partner in this strange year and has helped us to make the transition from in-person events to online. She's produced all of our webcasts this year, and it was such a pleasure to work with her a little more closely than usual. We participated in Give Local York for the first time this year, and our community supported us to the tune of more than $3,000, which will go a long way towards sustaining us during this strange time. We are so very grateful for our 2020 season sponsor, KBG Injury Law, whose generous support has made this season possible and given us the flexibility to make the necessary shift to virtual events. Here to say a few words on behalf of KBG is Brian Strong.
Hello, my name is Brian Strong, and I'm one of the managing partners at KBG Injury Law. I hope everyone is doing as well as can be given the unprecedented year we have had. KBG Injury Law was founded in 1983, and the firm has steadily grown and today is York's largest and most successful personal injury law firm. We have a long-standing tradition of supporting the community, and in 2014, we established the KBG Community Fund through the York County Community Foundation. Since its inception 6 years ago, the KBG Community Fund has issued grants totaling $120,930 to 56 different organizations throughout central Pennsylvania. It is through the KBG Community Fund that we are able to support such great programs as York Story Slam. Story Slam is the kind of thing that makes a community cool and fun to be part of. My wife and I have attended many, and we very much enjoy it. Tonight, I'm happy to announce that KBG Injury Law will continue its sponsorship for York Story Slam for 2021. Congratulations to all the storytellers and good luck.
Thanks again to KBG Injury Law. We appreciate your support in 2020, and we're thrilled to continue our partnership in 2021. And finally, thank you to everyone who shared their stories throughout the year. 2020 is our 5th season of live storytelling in downtown York. Since 2016, we've welcomed more than 3,700 attendees and have had about 570 names in the hat. That's 570 true personal stories shared with neighbors, friends, acquaintances, and strangers in the safe space that York Story Slam provides. Storytelling is a wonderful way to get to know others in your community, to uncover things you have in common with your neighbors, and to recognize and understand our differences. Tonight's theme is gifts. The names of our 11 2020 Story Slam winners are in the hat. We will draw them one at a time as we go. But first, some rules. The stories should reflect the theme of the evening, which, as we know, is gifts. The story should be true to the best of the storyteller's recollection. The story should be about 5 minutes long, and there should be no notes, no props, no music, just the storyteller and the freshly sanitized microphone. Here's how the 5-minute rule works. When they hear this, they've hit the 5-minute mark, and they should start to wrap it up. If they hear this, they've hit 6 minutes, and it's time to get the hell off the stage. Let's meet our judges. Our first judge is Carla Wilson. Carla is co-founder for Lancaster Story Slam, which started in 2015. She's currently the virtual event producer for both Lancaster and York Story Slams and produces their podcasts. She is a storytelling enthusiast, coordinating and attending as many storytelling events as she can and enjoying the community that it builds. Carla currently lives in Lancaster, PA. Our second judge is Jason Plotkin. Plotkin peaked in 2002 when he was crowned the jalapeno eating champion of the York JC's Chili Cook-Off. Life was uneventful until 18 years later when he was asked to judge the 2020 York Story Slam finals. He spends his days silently judging people, so this task is right in his wheelhouse. Our final judge is Scott Fisher. Scott is the PA State Capitol Bureau Chief for USA Today Network, as well as Community Engagement Editor for the York Daily Record. He is also the organizer of our beloved York Storytellers project, which presents curated, coached evenings of live storytelling events in York County. Each storyteller will be given 2 scores on a scale of 1 to 10, content and presentation. For content, does the story have substance? Is there a story arc, a beginning, a middle, and an end? For presentation, how good is their delivery? Are they engaging? Have they kept their story to around 5 minutes? The stakes are high. The winner of tonight's Story Slam will receive the trophy and the title of Best Storyteller in York. Let's pull the first name. Our first storyteller this evening is Rachel Pale. Rachel won our Growing Pains Story Slam in May when she shared lessons she took away from an abusive relationship in college.
And what I learned mostly is that growing pains should never leave bruises. And they did. And the night that he took me and slammed my head into the kitchen floor 4 times and left like a abrasion on my head and left marks on my neck, my arms, and my knees, you would think that I would know that that pain should never come in a relationship or ever.
I asked each of the storytellers a question before tonight, the same question. I asked if we woke up tomorrow in a COVID-19 free world, what's the first thing they would do? Rachel said she would drive to Philly without a mask.
So I've never been a really big fan of the white elephant Christmas gift exchange. You always end up with a really shitty gift or something that you got last year, like why do I have 3 quesadilla makers in my basement? It's because I keep choosing to participate in this stupid gift exchange. And so last year I decided that I didn't want to be part of a reality where I got a gift that I didn't ask for. And on February 22nd, 2019, I attempted to take my own life. And that was a really big thing for me. I grew up in a family of 4, and my brother was always the one who had depression, and he was always the bad kid. And one night I was sitting at the dinner table by myself, and I couldn't eat. And so I put down my fork, and I walked over to the medicine cabinet, and I looked at everything that was available, and I was like, I'm too tired to try to figure out how many Advil it would take to put me in the deep sleep, in the big sleep. And so I said, you know what, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it right. I'm gonna return this gift that I didn't ask for. I made it 22 years this far, and I don't have the receipt, but I'm gonna return the gift, and I'm gonna follow through. So I walked upstairs. My mom had went to take a shower, my brother had moved out, and my dad was on his 13th hour of working an hour away. So I said, this is great, this is perfect. I'm completely in my element. I'm at home, it's quiet. And I sat on the foot of my bed, and I just remember my head was so full of noise that all I could think was that I would want it to be quiet for 1 second. I just wanted to be quiet. And I reached into my dresser and I pulled out a belt. I used it for work. I'm wearing it now. I know I'm not supposed to have a prop, but I brought it along with me. And I tied it around my neck, and I pulled that thing really hard. And I just hoped that I wasn't gonna let go. And in the pit of my stomach, I felt that I was gonna get sick. And I have a white carpet in my bedroom. And in that moment, I thought about my mom walking in to my bedroom and not only finding her daughter dead on the ground, but having to clean up the vomit and take the carpet remover and scrub. And I wasn't sure which one she was gonna pick first. Would she pick me up and put me on the bed, or was she gonna clean the carpet first? I couldn't decide. But all I knew then was that, shit, I made the wrong choice. I didn't want to follow through, and thank God I chickened out. And I checked myself into a rehab facility, and I stayed there for about 11 days, and it was the best 11 days of my life. I had no phone. My boyfriend at the time had no idea where I went. I showed up with like 4 pairs of jeans, and they checked all of my shampoo, conditioner, and makeup products, and if it had alcohol within the first 3 ingredients, they took it away and you had to sign it out. I did my very first and hopefully last squat and cough. It was horrible. I hated it. It's degrading. And after I got out, I realized that this life that I've been given, this gift to walk, to breathe, to speak, to share, to write, to run, to love and be loved, and to have my heart broken and to break hearts is something that I never wanted to return. And from that day, I have been loved, I have loved, I've had my heart broken, and I will continue to have my heart broken. And that is all part of the gift that I didn't ask for. And as I grow up, as I move forward, and I consider having children of my own, I also have to consider, is this a gift that I am willing to continue to give? Is this a story that I am willing to share again? To choose to take your own life is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And to continue to live my life and let it be whatever I want it to be, to change the story, is something that I look forward to every day. Thank you.
Rachel, I think it's a real gift that you made that decision and could be here to share that story with us tonight. Thank you for that. Our next storyteller this evening is Phil Broder. Phil won our February Slam. It was the last one we hosted in person, and the theme was second chances. He told a story about a freshman English assignment that led to him throwing a fish onto the ice at a hockey rink, as one does.
And we finally scored. And the crowd is going wild. And then people start going, fish, fish, fish. And I reached down into this hefty bag on the floor and pulled out the fish.
When I asked Phil what's the first thing he'd do if all the COVID restrictions disappeared, he said, cough loudly and publicly. I've been holding it in for months.
I was driving home on Route 18 through southern Wisconsin, headed home to Iowa after a weekend with my friends. And as one does when you're driving alone at night, I was thinking about my life and about my plans, whether I was building out of concrete or out of sand, and how sometimes money really does make the world go round. But you know, trying to measure your life is a little bit like trying to measure the current from inside a boat. Sometimes the only thing you know for sure is that the damn thing still floats. Had to work the next morning, so I was trying to get home fast. I was short on time, but low on gas. Pulled into a service plaza, but it was closed. Car started to sputter as I got back on the highway, but I wasn't worried because I'd done this before, and I knew that with this car, I can usually get an extra mile or two if the hills go right. Yeah, I've run out of gas before. I do it all the time. Heck, it's practically a hobby. But I've never actually had to get out of the car and walk. I mean, running on fumes or coasting into a gas station makes me feel like a superhero. Or like a marathon runner who knows just how far he can push his body before he gives out. Having to get out and walk makes me feel like a delusional moron. So I kept driving. 4 long miles. I get off at the next exit, some suburban mall, still no gas anywhere in sight. Car finally dies. I'm on a hill at the light. I step out of the car to start pushing into the parking lot, and my foot lands on a soggy $5 bill. I figure it's play money somebody put there just to fuck with my head, but it's real. And there's more of it. On the grass, on the side of the road, by the mall. My head is down and all I'm thinking about is stuffing as much of it in my pockets as I can before I get caught, before somebody realizes that it's not mine. I pick up a 5, I pick up a 10, I pick up a $20 bill. A woman in an SUV pulls up. My instinct tells me she's come to claim it. It's her money. She wants half. But she starts picking up the money and putting it in my hands. How does it happen, she wants to know. I don't know, I say, and that's the truth. A man in a truck pulls up. He doesn't see the money, wants to know if I want to push into the parking lot. That'd be great, I say. The woman hands me a $100 bill and says again, how did it happen? It flew out the window, I said. Well, he doesn't know what I'm talking about, and she doesn't know what he's talking about, and she keeps handing me money. She hands me the last set of bills and says, is it all there? Yes! I say yes because I am the Lord of the bills and my pockets are filled with somebody else's soaking wet cash. Now you have to understand that it's my blessing in life, maybe it's a curse, let's just call it a gift, to always be behind the truck that loses something. I've been behind the Utz potato chip truck with the back doors flapping open. Case of barbecue chips comes out and explodes on my front bumper. I've been behind a roofing contractor with a trailer full of cedar shingles. Shingles come popping up, lock onto my windshield, boom, 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 punch right through. Driving in Michigan, I've been behind an 18-wheeler, and the roof of the trailer peels back like a sardine can. 75-foot long piece of sheet metal going down I-94. And the one that they still talk about, suburban Chicago, driving behind a flatbed truck carrying porta-johns. The chain on one of them broke, and that porta-john tipped over backwards and hit the interstate at 70 miles an hour and exploded. Now you got a twofold problem there. First, there are large pieces of plastic cartwheeling through your lane. But there's also sort of this hovering shit cloud. And there is no amount of Farfignugan that's going to get you out of that situation clean. So as I sat there in the parking lot, counting my cash, I think about the woman in the SUV, and that I should go over and tell her the truth, that it's not my money. But I tell myself she didn't need the money. I tell myself the money was put there for me, and she was sent to help me harvest my cash. And I really didn't need the help. And the timing just seems too strange to ignore, too symbolic to just let go. And it's not even about the money. I mean, it lifts me up, puts fuel in my tank, puts wind in my cape. It almost feels spiritual. And if you ask some people, they might think Jesus. They might think Buddha or Allah or Krishna or the great goddess or whoever they're into. Me, I'm still thinking about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I consider it a gift. Hell, I know it's a gift. I just haven't figured out who to thank yet. Just need to figure out who to thank.
Thanks, Phil. Our next storyteller this evening is MINA EDMONDSON. MINA won our August Bad Idea themed slam when she shared the story of the time she took her 4 kids on a spaceship to the moon.
3, 2, 1, blast off! And I turned my kids around, and there we are out in the wild blue yonder, flying into the sky when they could see nothing around them, and my son hit the ground. Womp! Ah! Screaming at the top of his lungs.
If COVID disappeared tomorrow and the restrictions were gone, MINA would visit her son and his wife and her grandchildren.
I want to share first that if I seem a little emotional this evening,
It's because I've been in mourning since I've heard of the passing recently of Sean Connery. It was soon to be my daughter's 13th birthday, and I asked her, "What do you want for your birthday?" And she said she wanted to have a sleepover with her girlfriends at my house. And I thought, okay, we can do this. What do you want the theme to be? And she kind of looked at me and rolled her eyes and huffed, as only a 13-year-old can do, and said, "The Backstreet Boys, of course." And I should have known. I said, "Well, you're going to have to decorate because I have no idea how to decorate for a Backstreet Boy party." And she agreed. She thought that would be wonderful. And she also agreed she'd clean up after the party. Well, the day of the party came, and she had plastered the walls in my living room with pictures of the Backstreet Boys. There were album covers, and there were them dancing in their shows, and there was pictures of Brian and Kevin, a couple of each of them. There was a few pictures of Nick, quite a few pictures of Howie, but the major pictures on the wall were AJ. AJ was her very favorite. Well, the girls began arriving for the party, and that was the first thing they noticed was the wall full of pictures. And they were chattering and looking at the pictures. And I had already gone through the time with the parents on the phone because these girls were from Kinderdale, and several of them had never been in the city before, meaning York City. Well, I had to assure their parents that I would keep them safe. I promised I wasn't going to put them out on the street corner for a couple of hours or anything through the night. But after their parents dropped them off and they saw the wall and they were all excited, I said, "Well, now we're going to go to dinner and we're going to walk downtown to Marcello's, my daughter's favorite place to get pizza in town." So as they start down the steps, I say, "Oh, wait a minute, I forgot my wallet, I'll be right back." And I ran into my office and I grabbed one of the pictures off of my wall and I substituted it for one of the pictures on the wall, the gallery wall in my living room, just wondering how long it would take the girls to notice. Well, we go to Marcello's and they're eating pizza and they're swigging Mountain Dew. So by the time we left there, they were as giddy as you could possibly be. And we're walking back up the street. We go to cross Duke and everything was fine until the light at the crosswalk started blinking. You know, halfway through it starts blinking. And one of the girls just stopped in her tracks and started crying because she didn't know what to do when the light blinks at the crosswalk. We just sort of shoved her across the street and we said, "You keep walking. You don't stop in the middle of the road." So we get back to the house and they begin the party for real. They crank up the music and they're dancing and singing and they have the lights turned down low a little bit. And I head to the back of the house and I call my friend and I say, "Okay, it's time." Now my friend, young Puerto Rican guy, and he could look like Mark Anthony on one of his good days, or he could look like AJ on one of his bad days, you know? So he comes in and he had nailed AJ that night. The sunglasses, the big earrings, the Fu Manchu, the necklace, the huge cross hanging around his neck, and a jacket. And I said, "Come on." And we go to the front of the house. And I open the door to the living room and I say, "Lethea, you have another friend here for your party." And everybody kind of looks up like, "Who?" And in walks AJ. Those girls started screaming and yelling and hollering. I mean, if the wind was blowing the right way, you could have heard them all the way in Spring Grove. They were that loud. They were so excited. And AJ announced he could only stay for a few minutes because he had to catch the tour bus when it went back around the block. And he kissed my daughter on the cheek and he kissed each of the girls on the hand as he was getting a picture with them. And he left. Well, they were so excited. They were just through the roof. They were all over the place. And I didn't think they would ever begin to settle down. And through all of that, they never noticed the picture that I had changed on the wall in the gallery. And as my daughter, they finally settled and she started opening her presents for the evening. Behind her left shoulder in every single picture was the photograph of this older, distinguished gentleman sitting by the pool, wearing a white cabana robe, laid back, his ankles crossed, staring at the camera. And that picture was of the inimitable Sean Connery. Thank you.
MINA's our reigning Grand Slam champ, so she's defending the title this evening. Our next storyteller this evening is Michael Sirianni. Michael tied to win our Goosebumps Story Slam in October when he told us about a former bandmate he'd lost touch with and then years later crossed paths with again.
About 6 months later, I got a phone call wanting to know if I had seen or heard from Eric Christensen. And I got goosebumps. You see, it was the FBI. And it turned out that Eric was a fugitive.
If we waved a magic wand and made COVID-19 disappear, the first thing that Michael would do is travel. Here's Michael.
This is a story about two baby girls born 5 days apart that will either break or heal your heart, or both. It's a story about my sister, Dana. For as long as I can remember, my sister has wanted to be a mom. And so it was with great happiness that our family arrived at her announcement several years ago that after many years, after many trials and treatments and tests, she and her husband had conceived and were expecting. Now, I know you hear this about pregnant women all the time, but it's true, they glow. She had something different about her. And at 35 years old, my sister, who had tried to conceive forever, was the picture of joy. Our entire family enjoyed that throughout the spring and the summer until one day in August, I was at work and I got a phone call. At a routine doctor's visit, their obstetrician was forced to tell them that the baby's heartbeat had stopped. Faced with a decision I can't even imagine, my sister chose to be induced and give birth. And at 27 weeks, my daughter, my niece, her daughter, Micah Grace, was stillborn. I cannot even imagine the way that the world came crashing down on her and her family, or the pain that they endured. But through her church and through therapy and through support groups, my sister found a way to not give in to the pain. And eventually, she began to rekindle her dream of becoming a mom. This, however, would not be physical. She did not feel compelled to carry another baby, understandable. So she turned to adoption. And after thousands of more dollars and months of paperwork and interviews, she was granted a visitation with a little girl who happened to be born 5 days after Micah Grace. Ironically, a little girl who was born at the very moment that my sister, for the first time, sat in the waiting room at a grief counselor. A little girl whose parents were unable to take care of her and who had been in the foster system. And so on February 3rd, 2011, this little girl came to my sister's house to play. Things went well. The following weekend, the agency recommended the girl should come back and play again. And it went well. The weekend after that, they suggested a sleepover, and the little girl was excited. The weekend after that, on February 26th, 2014, my sister's 38th birthday, the agency called and gave her the greatest gift of her life. That was the day that Dessa, my niece, came home for good. Thank you.
Beautiful story, Michael. Our next storyteller is Par Bowman. Par won our Teen Spirit themed slam in September with her story about the time she competed in a teen scholarship pageant.
It was almost like I had learned to just play Mary Had a Little Lamb, and now I've arrived to perform with the symphony orchestra. They're well practiced. I obviously ain't ready for this. So my goal when I step in is just don't make a fool of yourself.
If COVID disappeared and everything opened back up tomorrow with no restrictions, Par would gather with all the family and friends she hasn't been able to visit.
I needed a crystal ball. If I had a crystal ball, I could touch that magic that I knew for certain was there, but can never quite reach. And once I connected with that magic, then I could share it with everyone. We would gaze into the crystal ball, and we could check in on Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny or peer into the fairy realm. So 3 years running, I asked Santa for a crystal ball. And every birthday, I asked my parents. And I can't deny that I was a little let down that as a kid, that was the one big gift that I really wanted, and I never got. But the reason I felt like I needed that crystal ball to connect with the magic and share it was because I was a true believer. I had had a lot of encounters that were just on the edge of magic, including a trip to Fairyland. Now that came about because I thought that the Tooth Fairy probably had a pretty bad business model and that she needed a little extra cash. So I put some money under my pillow, a penny under my pillow. And I woke up to a letter from Felicia Fairy, and she had transported my brother and me to Fairyland. So attached to the letter, there was this little envelope, and it contained things from our visit. There were sequins gathered from the streets of Fairyland because, of course, that's what they're paved in. There were moondrops, literal drops of the moon. And if you go to Michael's, you can find these extra large sequins that are white and they have this iridescent, pearly rainbow sheen to them, ripped off from moondrops. And I was a little concerned that somebody had infiltrated Fairyland. Nonetheless, I thought, if fairies don't feel like walking or flying, I bet they can perch on a moondrop and it'll float them wherever they want to go because why not? The last thing in the envelope was a magic wand. It was a little bigger than a matchstick and it was all light blue and silver glitter. And Felicia explained that we had gotten to meet Mother Fairy, who was she was so impressed with us that she rewarded Felicia with a new wand with much stronger magic. And guess who got to keep the old wand? And I spent hours trying to squeeze the little bit of magic out of that wand with no success. But of course, to protect the secrets of Fairyland, she had to erase our memories. But she was sure during the quiet moments of sleep that those memories would come back to us. She then went on to describe the way our eyes sparkled and the smiles that never left our faces. And even the sounds we made in joy and wonder, and I could not remember my trip to Fairyland, but my chest was near bursting with the joy and wonder left over from that visit. And if I had a crystal ball, I could connect with that again, and I could share that feeling with everyone I loved. I never gave up on wanting to share that magic, but I can't deny that the past few years, I've not felt the magic the way I used to. Nothing big or tragic, just a little bit of everything. Feeling tired. And despite that, I still have been looking to find ways to connect to the magic. And then a pandemic comes, and I haven't been working. So that gave me a lot of time to connect with the little everyday magic, but also a lot of time to think about the big questions that loom, like, what's the next chapter for me? Which then led me to ask, well, what brings me joy? And the types of things that kept coming to my mind were when my kids received from Santa handmade ornaments that he had made for them from things that belonged to him. And he wrote them these long letters saying, and he'd go on tangents about the, epic ribbon room at the North Pole. But then he explained the backstory to the objects he chose and why he chose them for them. And then the DIY, over-the-top, ridiculous birthday parties I would plan for them. They have been solving mysteries with Scooby-Doo, and weirdly enough, Hello Kitty as well. And they have had circuses, and they've gone on a quest to the Lonely Mountain. And along the way, they stopped in Diagon Alley, and they had iocane powder and crossed the bog of eternal stench and all these other adventures because I wanted them to have all the magic. And even in my professional life, I got to plan events and try to touch the magic that way. My favorite one being Magic at the Museum, where I got to have over 1,000 people come in and experience something that I and my team created. And I thought about what Felicia described my face looking like, which had to have mirrored the look that was actually on my face when I was reading her words. And the looks on my kids' faces, and the looks on their friends at the birthday parties, and the people who came to my events, and that brings me joy. And sometime in my 30s, my parents finally did get me a crystal ball, but by that point, it did not matter because they gave me the best gift ever, the exact gift that I actually wanted, because I have touched magic and I have been able to share it with so many people. And I don't know what my next chapter is going to hold, but I can't help but believe that there's still magic waiting for me.
I think we could all use a little more magic. Our next storyteller tonight is Jamie Beth Cohen. Jamie Beth tied to win our July road trip story when she told us about the time she and her brother were in danger on a road trip.
But watching him get clean was harrowing, and walking with him on his journey of sobriety was probably the most intense thing I had done at 22. But about 10 years later, we were on the side of a mountain and I almost killed him.
If COVID went away tomorrow and Jamie Beth could do anything she wanted, she said she'd hug lots of people she doesn't live with. Take it away, Jamie Beth.
15 years ago, my father died under mysterious circumstances. I know how he died because I was there when the doctors turned off the machines, but I don't know why. I don't know why 12 weeks before I authorized the doctors to turn off the machines, his brain stopped working. Or more appropriately, it started working in a whole new and unproductive way. But I was with him when the feeding tube and the breathing tube were removed and the color drained from his face. 18 months later, I was in my office in New York City when a college friend called to tell me there had been a terrible accident and her younger brother, who was in his 20s, had suffered a massive traumatic brain injury. And she wanted to know everything I knew about hospitals and doctors and traumatic brain injuries. I told her what I could, and then a few months later, I actually moved to Los Angeles, completely unrelated to that, but where her brother was in the hospital and where her parents had relocated from China, where they were doing missionary work, to be with him. I made myself useful. I went to the hospital, I visited with them, I did errands for his parents. I got to know them. My friend's mom was religious in a way that was completely foreign to me. She felt God had called her back to the States to take care of her son, who was in fact released from the hospital into her care. They are now in their 13th year of caregiving for their son, who is a shadow of his former self. He's had multiple seizures since the accident, multiple infections. He's mostly unresponsive, and he cannot be left alone. And yet my friend's mom has given over her life willingly, graciously, to care for her child. I've had 2 kids of my own since this accident, and I've thought a lot about what it means to care for an ailing child, even one in their 20s, and what it means to care for an ailing parent, even one as relatively young as my father. And I still can't figure it out. About 3 years into their caregiving journey, I went for a walk with my friend's mom. We hadn't seen each other in a little while. I'd moved back east again. And we talked about Los Angeles, and we talked about doctors, and we talked about seizures. And it was during that walk that she told me it was a gift from God that my dad went as quickly as he did. And that was the first time I realized that she had no idea how it went down. That she and I were faced with the same choice, and we just chose differently. Make no mistake, there were gifts surrounding my father's death, but they were not from God. There were my friends who came over to pack my suitcase for me, because how do you pack for your father's funeral when he's still alive? There were the friends who bought my plane ticket. There were the friends who came over at 4 a.m. in the snow to drive me from my apartment to the airport. And there was the best gift I've ever received. And that's the knowledge that my father valued quality of life over quantity of life. And he would not have wanted to be on life support any longer than it took for us to say goodbye. This is a gift I hope all of you have received and none of you have to use. But in this time, it's important. And although I've had 2 children since the morning my father died, the greatest gift I have ever given was ending his suffering exactly how he would have wanted me to, and bearing witness to his final breath. I wouldn't have had it any other way, but I don't wish it on any of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Jamie Beth. Our next storyteller will be Jason Sable. Jason won our April Slam when the theme was Man versus Beast. He told us about his childhood pet, a cat named Smokey Joe. This was our first virtual slam before we figured out how to do speaker view for the audience so you can actually see all of us crying while he's telling the story.
And when I woke up in the morning, I felt the familiar warmth of a cat laying next to you. And it was before dawn, and I opened my eyes, and sure enough, Smokey Joe had somehow gotten into his usual nook in between my arm and my body. And I realized that at some point in the middle of the night, he must have gathered up all of the last remaining bits of strength that he had, and he jumped down from Sam. And he jumps down from the couch to cuddle with me just one last time. and he passed away later that morning.
If COVID disappeared and everything opened back up tomorrow with no restrictions, Jason would go sit at the bar in a busy restaurant on a Friday night and drink fancy cocktails and eat tapas.
Hey, so I recently turned 40 a couple years ago, and it wasn't that great, to be honest with you. I was kind of expecting like a big, awesome party and fun stuff, and instead it was just like kind of like a regular birthday. Like it wasn't bad, but it was just like a regular birthday. Like my wife and I went to dinner at Barbara Ray, and it was great, and I got some cool presents. But like I'm kind of like a festive, fun party person, and like none of my friends showed up. Like I kept waiting to like, oh, are we gonna go to the Holy Hound next? And like everyone's gonna be there, and then like she was just like, let's go home. I'm tired, and I was like, oh, okay. So like that was disappointing. And but it was okay because I knew the next week was the Penn State-Ohio State game. And everyone, all our friends were gonna come over to our house for the Penn State-Ohio State game, and it was gonna be so much fun. We were gonna get a bunch of beers. We ordered a bunch of wings from the Vault, rest in peace, the Vault. And it was just gonna be great. We were so excited about it, I was fired up. And it was also gonna be the year Penn State beat Ohio State. We're not gonna talk about that. And so 6 o'clock, Andy's supposed to come pick me up. 5:45, I take the garbage out. And while taking the garbage out, I slip and fall. And I fall on my neighbor's fence. And my neighbor's fence is about yay high, and it's wrought iron, and it has these little fleur-de-lis on the top. And so they're like little stabby things. And I fall on it on my chest, and I'm impaled on the fence. And immediately I realize that this isn't good, because I look down and I see blood on my shirt. And so I know this is bad. And I go inside and I say, Brandy, I think we're gonna have to go to the emergency room. I fell and I cut my chest. And she's remarkably calm. She says, I'm gonna have to call, let me see if I can get a babysitter. You go check it out upstairs. So I go upstairs to check it out, and I lift up my shirt. And sure enough, not only had my chest been impaled, it had actually impaled through my nipple. Cut my nipple right in half. And there was a gaping wound on my nipple, and you could see inside of it. And if you've ever seen the inside of your nipple, it's not great. So I apply a cold compress, and I come downstairs, and miraculously the babysitter was available, so that was great. And then bounding out of nowhere into our backyard is Philip Given. And I said, what are you doing here? He goes, I'm here to watch Harrison while you go to the emergency room. And I'm kind of out of it, a little bit in shock, and I'm, great, this is awesome. Thanks for coming, Philip. So we go to the emergency room, and it's Saturday night, mind you, in York City. And I walk in, and it is like the Day of the Dead. Like, people just draped all over the chairs in the waiting room. The stench of death in the air, like just terrible. And I realized that I'm not gonna see the Penn State-Ohio State game. No one's coming over for chicken wings, and I'm gonna be in the hospital till 4 in the morning. So Brandy goes to call the babysitter with some instructions because she didn't really get to talk to her. And I'm sitting there, and then somehow I hear Jason Sable to the front. So I go to the front, and they say, we have an exam room available for you. I go into the exam room, and I'm still kind of out of it. And a doctor walks in, and he looks at it, and he goes, we don't see this very often. And I'm kind of out of it, and I honestly said to him, Doc, if you need to take off my nipple, you can. I don't need it anymore. Which is funny on a couple levels, because, you know, I'm a guy, and I don't need a nipple anyway. And also, I really thought he was gonna cut my nipple off. So he goes, oh, no, it's not that big a deal. We're gonna stitch it up, we'll get you out of here. So quickly numbs it up, puts 5 stitches in. We get out of there. We're in and out of the hospital in an hour on a Saturday night from the emergency room. We walk outside, the car is already there, waiting. And Brandy starts driving back, and we're going home. And I'm like, this is great. I'm not even going to miss kickoff. And then she goes, we got to stop and pick up Mike and AJ. And I go, because I'm not a good friend. I go, fuck them. They can walk. And she's insistent. So we got to go pick them up from Collusion. And as we're driving up King Street in front of Parliament, I see like a mob of people standing outside. And I'm like, look at all these idiots. What are they doing outside? And then as we get a little closer, I'm like, hey, I know all those idiots. And then Brandy's like, roll down your window. And I roll down my window and they all yell, nipple, nipple. And then I look over at Brandy and she says, hey, it's your 40th surprise birthday party. Get out of the car. So I hop out of the car and all my friends are there. My parents had come down from Erie. My brother and his family came down from Erie. The wings from the vault are there. There's a big screen TV set up with the football game. My favorite beer, Brooklyn Summer Ale, in case you want to buy me one later. And just great. The absolute best present I had ever received. But the real gift is having a wonderful wife and great friends who will plan a surprise party for you for months without your knowledge. No inkling, not a clue. And friends that'll come over at the drop of a hat or the slice of a nipple to watch your kids so you can go to the emergency room. And a wife who apparently will bribe an emergency room doctor to make sure that you get to your surprise party on time. And of course, a permanently perforated nipple so you never forget any of it.
Well, I think Jason gets the prize for the most times the word nipple appears in a Story Slam story, so way to go, Jason. Our next storyteller is Kat Knapp. Kat tied to win our January Best Day Ever Slam with her story about a turning point in her relationship with her family.
I hadn't actually seen my sisters or my stepmother in a while, and they don't like me. I'm the black sheep, it's very difficult being divorced, even though my parents are. Divorced and childless and a Democrat and fat all at the same time. I'm their walking worst nightmare.
If COVID magically disappeared tomorrow, Kat would travel. Here's Kat.
So I was a real nerd in high school. I grew up in a small suburban town to the south of Pittsburgh, and it was a new rich town, right? And my parents were divorced when I was younger, and my father moved 2 towns away. Now, the town that he moved to was an old rich town. So, in the new rich town where I was hanging out, you have people with like really big houses, but no furniture, because they couldn't afford to actually furnish the house. And, then they had like a really nice BMW that they never took to the shop because they couldn't afford to service it. But then you get to the old rich town, right? Where they all have money, but they still shop at thrift stores and, they've got really old houses and stuff. So I went to church in that town where my father lived. And, as the previously mentioned nerd, I went to the church group there every Wednesday night. Well, enter Chris. Chris comes in, and Chris had sideburns. He also had like that puke green old jalopy car that was essentially, like rust held together with paint. And he had those transitions lenses, but this was back in the 90s when they were new, so it just kind of looked like someone had peed on his glasses. But I thought that he was a badass, and he asked me out, and I was like, yes. And one day, so we start to date, of course, which was error number 1. One day he comes in and he says, I have a surprise for you, a gift. And I'm like, okay, great. He's like, we're all getting in the van, the aptly named church van that we all pile in. This was my second mistake, mistakenly thinking that because it was church affiliated, that I would somehow be safe. So we all pile into the van and he's like, we're going to West Virginia. And I'm like, okay. We're in the van, we're getting down. What are we doing? I'm trying to get hints from everybody. No one will talk. We pull up next to a pasture. And I'm like, what are we doing here? And he's like, come on, we're all jumping over the fence. Everyone's jumping over the fence. And in probably the wisest decision I had yet to make in my young 15 years, I turned to him as if in slow motion and said, I think I'll watch from here. And he piles over the fence. And I said, wait, you still haven't told me what's going on. We're going cow tipping. Now I know what you think I all just said. And you're like, oh, cats, you're from the city trying to tell us your little cow tipping story, and this is Central PA, and we know what's up. But I did not use a T, as in tasteless, or tee, or totally insane. I used a D, my friends. That is cow dipping with a D. A D is in delirious, a D is in disaster, a D is in dope. And watching from the fence line, I observed my friends cow dipping, which is an activity which involves 3 people and 1 cow. The cow, innocently standing in the pasture, is completely unbeknownst to it what is about to happen. And 1 person stands directly behind the cow. 2 people stand on either side of the cow. Now, apparently, luckily, again, I did not participate, but if the 2 people on either side of the cow ram the cow at the same place at the same time, the cow will flatulate. Now, as we all know, cow farts are almost pure methane. So this is like nature's finest whippet, right? And the person behind the cow gets high for a second and then staggers backward or passes out. And this is what I am standing here witnessing with the coolest dude in town participating, staggering around. I'm having all kinds of thoughts about what if there's a shart? Meanwhile, we have people on the ground and the cow is angry, right? It's chasing the other cow, slamming people, right? And I'm just watching this with shock and awe. And they all come piling back. They're all laughing. I'm not sure if they're high or, just covered in shit. And they all pile back into the van, and I'm now thinking like I'm the big nerd that, has to break up with the cool guy. But as I'm driving away, all I can think to myself is TIL, which I recently learned means today I learned. Not only can you not look a gift horse in the mouth, you cannot sniff a gift cow in the ass.
Cow farts, comedy gold. Way to go. Our next storyteller is Brad Jennings. Brad won our Pet Peeves themed Story Slam in June when he shared the story of the time there was an altercation over where he stored his suitcase on a flight.
I am terribly, entirely, irrationally, hopelessly terrified that there will not be any available bin space for my stuff when I get on the plane. Me and Rolly have been together for more than 20 years. Rolly is my black roller suitcase, and we go everywhere together. He takes care of my stuff, and I take care of Rolly. And he does not get checked. He does not get tossed in the cargo hold like garbage. He does not. He rides with me, safely stowed overhead in the comfort of the cabin.
I asked Brad what the first thing he'd do would be if COVID went away and there were no risks, and he said, I would hug everyone I see. Please welcome Brad Jennings.
So when I lived in New York, I used to go to a lot of Phillies games. And so when my daughter Jovi turned 4, as a birthday gift, I got tickets for our family to go to a game. Great seats for a Saturday afternoon in May. But on the day of the game, it was pouring rain in New York. And the forecast was for pouring rain all day in Pennsylvania. But the Phillies didn't postpone the game. In fact, they tweeted that it was definitely still on. So my wife Sue and I were deliberating, like, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna drive 3 hours in the pouring rain and traffic just to have the game be postponed so we can drive 3 hours in the pouring rain and traffic with disappointed kids? Or do we disappoint them now, stay in, and risk, we'll have to eat the tickets and risk that the game gets played, and the Phillies seem to think that it will be. So we're like, well, let's just go. So we grab our raincoats, we grab our kids, we go out to the car, where we immediately slam Jovi's fingers in the car door. Arrgh. So we scoop her up, screams, tears, mangled fingers and all. And they were mangled, like dented, purple, ugly. We hold her close, we ice her fingers, and after about a half hour, she's calmed down, and she's like, "Does this mean we can't go to the baseball game?" And my wife and I do like a silent deliberation, like, what are we gonna, do we cut bait now? Do we go back out into the monsoon? And Jovi goes, "Please, can we still go?" So we went. 3 hours through the pouring rain and traffic. And since we got a late start, the game had started while we were still on the road, and it did start. And when we got to the parking lot at the stadium, sure enough, it wasn't raining there. And it was like the third inning. So we got the kids out of the car, we start walking to the stadium, and it starts to rain. Perfect. So I pick up our older daughter, Lily, Sue picks up Jovi, and we start like fast walking to the stadium to get in under cover. Sue doesn't notice a curb stop in the parking lot, and she trips and falls hard. And breaking her fall was Jovi, who slammed her head into the pavement. Ugh. We scooped her up, screams, tears, mangled fingers, bruised skull and all, and we held her close, and then another deliberation, what are we gonna do? Back to the car? Do we need an ambulance? Do we just go inside and figure it out there? So that's what we did. So we went inside, and as soon as we got in, they stopped the game for the rain delay. All we could do at that point, we got ice cream for the girls. So they're eating their ice cream, we're watching water puddle up on this field, and before they were even finished with the ice cream came the announcement, the game was postponed. Back to the car, back into the rain, back into traffic. And on the drive home, it rained harder than it had all day. And I said to Sue, this was supposed to be Jovi's birthday gift. This has been the worst day of her life. I am not going back home without something fun to show for it. So we stopped in Lancaster at a restaurant for dinner that she liked. When we got in the lobby, it was packed. And they told us it was gonna be an hour wait. And then just then, we heard a familiar sound, Jovi's blood-curdling scream. A customer had opened the door of the restaurant to leave. Jovi stuck her fingers in between the door and the door jamb. That heavy door went shut, smashed her fingers again. The same fingers. Sue scooped her up, screams, tears, bruised skull, remangled fingers and all. I grabbed my head, looked a perfect stranger in the face and screamed, "It happened again!" Quick side note, if your kid ever smashes their fingers in the door such that they scream bloody murder in a crowded lobby of a restaurant, they will seat you immediately. You will still not get your food for an hour and the food will still suck, but they will seat you. We only took one photo that day. It was a picture of me and Lily and Jovi eating our ice cream with the tarp-covered baseball field in the background. And in the photo, Jovi, with her little bandaged fingers, is smiling from ear to ear. And it's a great photo. My wife framed it and gave it to me for Father's Day, and I keep it on my desk at work. And earlier this year, I was kind of looking at it, and I'm like, that photo was a lie. It's those big smiles, that was the worst day ever. So I was asking Jovi, I was like, "Jovi, what do you remember about this day?" And she's like, "We had so much fun." And I'm thinking to myself, really? 6 hours in the car, rain all day, 3 traumatic injuries, literally no baseball. And I said, "Jovi, what was fun about it?" She's like, "Well, I got to go to the Phillies stadium and we got to have ice cream." And I was like, "What else do you remember about it?" And she's like, "I don't know." And that memory, or loss of memory, thank you, concussion, for my wife and I was a real gift. Thank you.
Brad typically MCs our Story Slam. It's been really fun to have him back tonight as a competitor. Next storyteller is Corey Wolf. Corey tied to win our January Best Day Ever Story Slam with his story about sneaking into a Moulin Rouge-themed fundraiser in this very complex.
I didn't pay for a ticket. I did not pay for a ticket, $225. And so quickly my anxiety goes to 11 and I see someone I know and I sidle up to them. I have some random conversation. I don't even know what it was. And after a while, he's just like, so how'd you get in here? And I'm just like, I just walked in.
I asked Corey what the first thing he'd do would be if we could magically wake up tomorrow in a post-COVID-19 world, and he said he'd do a countywide bar crawl, with Uber, of course.
So in the last month since we learned the theme, which it actually wasn't a month, as I learned, that's what I wrote. It's been like 2 weeks. In that time that we learned about the theme, I have had no clue what I was going to tell a story about whatsoever. I knew one thing, which was that I wanted to somehow work in a joke about those low-quality moving images, GIFs. And now that you all asked, my favorite is of Wednesday Addams from the original 1960s Addams Family, and there's Lurch there, and she's just like dancing her heart out. That's my favorite GIF. And as I laughed and thought about that, I thought, no, you can't tell that. That's not a story at all. And I went back to the drawing board. And as I kept thinking, I thought, well, what if I tell a retrospective on all the jobs that I've had and how they've led me here? And that's a gift. Being a sausage salesman was truly a gift. And I thought about that. I wasn't in love with that storytelling at all either. And I wasn't going to tell that. I was afraid that I might have portrayed any kind of role I had in the past as a joke. And no job is a joke. They're all hard work, all that good stuff. So I'm bogged down by the wording that I'm thinking about, the perceptions that I'm looking to give and all that stuff. And I just want a story that is going to be interesting, that people are going to like and all that good stuff. And I'm here like 1 week out saying like, fuck, I don't have, this is my fourth story and I have no clue what I'm going to talk about. And it's the big one, so I gotta come up with something. And all of those things that I was thinking about, all the hard work that I was putting in and the debates I was having in my brain about what I was going to talk about, and all the perceptions that I wanted people to have and people to have of that story just came to thinking, I still don't know what I'm going to talk about. And I started thinking about all of the thinking I did about everyone else and how I think about and let my brain think about, well, how does someone perceive this story and how will they like it and all of that. And I've always done things like that. Walking down the road and the street every day, roads and streets, I look at people and I think that they're thinking, oh, his clothes are weird, or he's walking weird, or he just looks like a weird person. And I'm constantly thinking about what people think of me. I let that drive me. And to the point where I put myself into a $3,000 financial hole to do a public mural, like for the people, because I was too scared that someone would be unimpressed by me or not happy that I was even coming to ask for money. So I constantly let myself be in these areas where I put myself at a detriment. But at the same time, all of these mindsets have really just driven me, and well, I've achieved goals because of that mindset. And so having that train of thought and working so hard to make people happy, to not make people upset, to not set the wrong impressions has really gotten me to where I am now, and it's had its perks. But I mean, for what? For what cost? And how will I lead my life letting other people dictate what I do and how I do it? So I got to thinking a lot about that, and putting all of that into perspective and thinking about what I wanted to talk about. It was more so about this opportunity now to talk about this and having the opportunity to convey everything that I've thought about in this month that was actually 2 weeks, about what story I wanted to tell, and kind of letting everyone know how frustrating this whole process was and how much stress and piece by piece wording it was, and letting people know truly how I think about this whole thing and how I think every day. And so instead of really trying to create stories that I think people will like, this was an opportunity that I got to write a story that I liked. And if it helps anyone, which I mean, I hope that it helps people understand the way that I think on a daily basis, if I've gotten to convey that, I mean, that truly is the gift that I have, and I'm grateful to have had it tonight. Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you say sausage salesman? Definitely didn't know that about Corey. And of course, our final storyteller of the evening is Steph Holmes. Steph tied to win our July road trip story slam when she shared a touching coming-of-age story about a road trip that helped her to find her passion in life.
Even though my life felt normal at the time, I was beginning to realize that maybe it wasn't so normal. Back home, I faced a mountain of month-old dirty dishes, food rotting in pots and pans, an ocean of dirty laundry lying stagnant around the washer and dryer, and 3 fully capable people in that household that I felt so desperate to take care of because they wouldn't take care of themselves. But I'll tell you that no amount of chore charts, pep talks, begging, or screaming is enough to shake someone else out of their own depression.
I asked Steph what she would do if COVID risk disappeared overnight, and she said she would go hug her niece and nephew. Here to tell the last story of the evening is Steph.
Many people don't understand it, but I love to draw and paint bugs. To make my artwork, I'm often projecting my imagination into the lives of other creatures to picture what their worlds might look like. In one of my latest drawings, we see a snail and a ladybug slowly crossing paths along a dandelion stem. We know that they see each other, they have eyeballs, but is there some sort of deeper connection? Have they met before somewhere else in the garden? Is there a dialogue? I don't believe that we can answer any of those questions. There's just so much about nature that we can't explain. At the very minimum, we see 2 beings crossing paths, both with the ability to suffer, both who strive to live lives with full bellies, both with instincts to avoid danger, and perhaps even hopes of finding a companion. So my thoughts are, what's really so different between us and them? Now, this is my heart at age 30, but at age 5, I was a defiant little girl sitting crouched on the edge of our front flower bed with a leaky garden hose in my hands. I was using the drip from that garden hose to draw circles of water around individual ants to see if they could swim. And spoiler alert, this type of ant does not swim. So the little black ant in front of me reached out and touched the edge of the water with its antenna and then immediately began to panic. It found itself completely surrounded by my moat of water. And I was, of course, sitting there waiting and watching for it to jump into the water and swim to the other shore. But of course, it just didn't seem so eager to do so. So I grew impatient, and I remember taking that hose and filling in the rest of that little island of safety and watching that little black ant promptly sink to the bottom. Now, my mom was one of those moms that has eyes in the back of her head. Either that or she was just always checking in on me because I was always up to no good. Whatever brought her there that day, she found me drowning ants. And my mom didn't stop me, she didn't punish me, but what she said to me seemed to transform every cell in my body. She said, "You know, Stephanie, God made the ants and the other animals of the world too, not just you." That was as if a tuning fork had just been struck in my chest, and the vibration from that stopped me dead in my tracks. Now, earlier that summer, I almost drowned in a friend's swimming pool, and this is the first time I'm telling that story. Nobody knew about it. I distinctly remember the world being bright blue and ice cold, but my lungs were burning, my limbs were burning, and my eyes were burning. I was doing the only thing that I knew how to, and I was jumping or kicking off the bottom of the deep end with all of my might every time I sunk low enough in the water to be able to feel the floor. At first, those big kicks were enough to launch me through the water and get me to the top, and I was able to gulp down some air before sinking again and having to repeat that excruciating process. It felt like I was doing this for hours. How long was I drowning in the deep end of this pool alone? Nobody there to save me. My limbs no longer had the strength to get me to the top of the water, and I remember clearly this deep sense of pressure coming in from all sides. Suddenly, my feet caught what I think might have been the edge of the shallow end, the bottom of the pool, and I kicked off the bottom one last time, launched myself through the water, but this time I was able to grab on to the side of the pool and slowly drag my exhausted body out of the water. At the top, I realized that nobody saw that happen. There was nobody there. And you know what? Nobody heard about it happening as I just rejoined the birthday party, which had moved from the backyard to the front without me. So I'm remembering this and I'm starting to panic. I blew on the top of that puddle and it flattened out and absorbed into the wood of the flower bed. And I watched with great fear as that little black ant slowly dragged her exhausted body out of the water. Looking back, and while I was writing down this story, I realized that that day my mom gave me perhaps the most important gift that I'll ever receive. She gave me the gift of empathy. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Thank you, Steph. That's a perfect sentiment to end our evening of stories. Congratulations again to all of our storytellers for winning one of our monthly slams and for the great job you've all done tonight. And now, let's find out who takes home this year's trophy. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the York Story Slam 2020 Grand Slam is Rachel Pale. Congratulations again, Rachel. We won't have a Story Slam in December. We'll be putting the finishing touches on next year's series. We'll continue to host our monthly events on the third Tuesday of the month in 2021. They'll continue to be virtual until it's safe to gather again. Here are the themes for our 2021 season. Visit yorkstoryslam.com and sign up for our monthly newsletter so you'll receive information delivered right to your inbox about how to sign up to attend our 2021 Story Slams and information on how to share a story of your own. What story will you tell? Thank you for tuning in. Good night.